presentation by thanking Barbara for the excellent, superb meal we had yesterday and the very efficient organization of this conference. And of course, I'm generally grateful about being here because I think we really need, as you have outlined, Jenny, a comparative perspective on this. I'm often surprised to find that politicians reflect on those topics purely based on the national situation. And this is true for a variety of topics. As many of you may know, in Belgium, we could say that we are addicted to constitutional reforms. And the big one is coming in 2024. And on the French-speaking part of the country, you hear people screaming, what if we were to split social security or have police or justice no longer an entirely federal competence, then it will be the end of Belgium. And they don't look across the border at Germany, Switzerland, United States. It's perfectly normal in a federal state to have a splitting of such competencies. And in religious education, exactly the same. We look at what we know, what we've always been doing, and we don't cooperate to see what's the best practice in countries facing the similar challenges as our own. So I think this is very important, what we are doing today. As you mentioned, I work at CRISP, which is an independent non-profit center monitoring public policy, and one of my favorite topics is public policy impacting religion. So therefore, I have kind of an outside look on these matters. And I have chosen to begin my presentation with a picture of the inside view of the cupola of the Basilica of Kuckelberg in Brussels. It's one of the biggest churches in the world. So why did I do that? On the one hand, because I didn't want to have a picture of obviously Muslim students sitting in a classroom. I thought that was a little bit essentializing the problematic. But I wanted as well to remind you that Belgium is a Catholic country. It was extremely Catholic. The only time we asked people about their conviction was 1846. We had 99.7% of people answering that they were Catholics. Of course, things have changed. They started to really change in the 1960s because of secularization and immigration. But yet, the background of Belgium is a Catholic background. Now, I will talk briefly, hopefully, trying to be brief, about the general system of state and church relationship in Belgium, because this is necessary to understand the framework where into which we organize religious education. I will talk similarly about the Belgian school system, and then I will focus on Islamic religious education in Belgian schools. Here you have a picture of something that's a little bit less Catholic. It's a picture of the great mosque in Brussels in the Jubilee Park. Some picture many of you are certainly familiar with. And it's an interesting building as well, because it was built in 1880 as the Oriental Pavilion for the World Fair commemorating the 50th anniversary of Belgium. And 80 years later, somebody said, wow, that looks really Oriental. Wouldn't it be absolutely fitting for a mosque? Let's give it to the Prince of Saudi Arabia so we can have a nice place of worship in the capital of Europe. And I think this is a perfect illustration of the way Belgium has been dealing with Islam. I don't have a word in English for bricolage, bric-à-brac, but you get the meaning. We just day by day went with the flow, deciding, yeah, that might be nice, let's do this, but there was not a real thought-after public policy. State and church relationship in Belgium, most of you already know, others have guessed from comments yesterday. This is a system where the state recognizes several religions. Here you have a picture of a former Prime Minister, Charles Michel. I looked for a picture with Alexander De Croo, but because of COVID, there were no, at least I couldn't find trace of a meeting between the Prime Minister and the religious leaders of the country. So this dates from the previous government. I love to show you this picture because from, or a similar one, the starting point, you realize what does it mean that we recognized religion and worldviews, because you have the representative of secular humanism there as well. It means that we consider that middle-aged men wearing a tie, except if they are bishops, are adequate representative for the Belgian population. I think that's one of the flaw of the system. Now, seriously, we have a system that has been unchanged since 1831. Back in 1831, it was an extremely modern system, very liberal and very generous, because from the starting point, we decided to recognize, meaning to financially support not only the Catholic Church, but the Protestants. And you must remember that a lot of Protestants were actually Dutch citizens, and we had been in a conflict with the Netherlands for Belgium to get its independence. We paid as well an Anglican chaplain, and the Anglican chaplain, he was mostly catering to the needs of British citizens, foreign nationals. And then we paid as well the rabbis, which is considering the prominent, how anti-Semitism was still very prominent in the 19th century. This was just incredible that by 1832 we said to the rabbi, yes, of course you get some money as well. There's no question. Belgium is a state that does not discriminate between citizens based on their religious beliefs. So this is quite remarkable. In the 20th century, we went on applying this principle of openness to other faiths, and in 1974 we recognized Islam, and in 1985 Christian Orthodoxy. At the same time, there has always been in Belgium a very strong anti-clerical movement. Just like in France, in the late 19th century, people were opposing the social importance of the church, and they wanted as well to get rid of this system of recognition and payment of salaries to the clergy and so on. But unlike France, in Belgium, those people, the liberals, never gained political power for a long time. So we never had a law that would be similar to the 1905 legislation in France. So we remain with that system. And then something absolutely amazing happened at the end of the 20th century. The secular humanist movement, which we call vrijzinnigheid in Dutch, and stupidly in French, laïcité organisée, because that really gives laïcité another meaning than what it should have. Those people, most of those people, some were not happy, but a majority of those people who were actually directing those philosophical associations said, okay, if we can't destroy the system, we want to be part of it. So gradually they decided we want to be recognized as a worldview, and we want to get money as well. So we changed the constitution, and since 2002, secular humanism is being financed just like religions are. This, of course, has done a lot to prevent further changes to the system, because the driving force behind the change is now receiving a lot of money for not changing. Buddhism has been asking to be recognized for many years, and it's actually in the current government agreement that they will get recognized, but I don't know what they're waiting for. Maybe some budget issues at the end of COVID, but it's not happening. You have the Hinduist waiting as well. Many more worldviews would like to be recognized. Very quickly, is not the topic of the day. If you are recognized, you enjoy the payment of salaries and pensions by the federal state. You have support for the local communities, parishes, mosques, and the like, and most importantly, you get access to religious education in public schools. As an illustration, just the percentage of people being financed by the state by recognized confession. One remark about this, it is very clear that Islam, as the second religion practiced in Belgium, does not get its fair share of the money, for complex reasons, but there is definitely a clear de facto discrimination here. Islam, precisely. We no longer have a general survey of convictions in Belgium. Best estimates put the Muslim population in Belgium around 7 to 8% of the population, mostly urban. I realized when I'm starting this slide that I forgot one very important thing in my presentation. After thanking you for the invitation, I have to thank Lenny for putting me into this adventure. And I wanted to say that I'm here presenting the results of an article we wrote together in the book. And this is really the point I'm getting at, that of course any opinion that I present in this presentation, of course, remains my own. I didn't want to imply that...
I think we agree.
Okay. I just realized I'd forgotten this important introductory point. The recognition of Islam in Belgium has been an adventure, and unfortunately an unpleasant adventure for the Muslim communities in Belgium. Because we took the decision in 1974, and I went back to the parliamentary debates, having absolutely no clue as to how we were going to implement this decision. We just thought, okay, recognition by parliament is enough, and the rest will follow. And we forgot that we needed a representative body, we needed structure for the mosque, we needed religious trained teachers for education in schools. We didn't think about all those things. And it's been an ongoing, painful process since then, and a very slow as well, because we started early with religious education in the classroom in the late 1970s, but we did not foresee training for the teachers at the time. And what is really at the core of the recognition in Belgium, mainly recognizing as well the mosque and paying the imam, this did not take place until 2007. But of course, the Islamic communities were not helped by the fact that we had a state reform in between, and in 2001, some of the competencies shifted to the regions. But still, basically, the main issue was finding a representative body that both the Muslim communities, plural, and the public authorities agreed on being desirable. And now, currently, we are facing another crisis because the Minister of Justice has just announced that it was withdrawing the recognition of the executive of Muslims in Belgium. So we are still in another crisis. And the fundamental reason why we have those crises is because our system has a fundamental flaw in it. I mean, we have two constitutional principles clashing. The first one is religion autonomy, state and church separation. Even though it's not perfect in Belgium, but there is an autonomy. Public authorities cannot go look into the matters of religion. Second principle we have is public financing. So we have to finance people, but we don't have control over them. It's a problem. And for the public financing to take place, we need an intermediary. This intermediary is the representative organ for the Muslim community, is the executive of the Muslims in Belgium. The main task of the executive, indeed, are to appoint the clergy that will be financed by the state, to control the mosque mainly on a financial perspective, and to appoint Islamic religious education teachers, to appoint inspectors, and of course to determine the programs. So when this central organization is in jeopardy, the whole system is in jeopardy. Now, Belgium's whole system, and here you have posters of electoral propaganda from the 19th century, is very much a product of this opposition between Catholics on the one hand and liberals, anti-clericals on the other. This means, as was already previously mentioned, that in Belgium you have two major school networks. One is state schools, public schools, and the other one is the free schools, of which a majority are Catholic. These statistics here come from the latest yearly report of the Catholic Church in Belgium, and you can see that between 41 to 72% of students, depending on the level and the community, are actually attending a Catholic school. Catholic schools, meaning they are supported financially by the state at a level that put them nearly at the same level as the public schools. The main difference is that they offer only one religious education, Catholic education when they are Catholic, which is the case of more than 97% of them, while public schools offer a choice between all the recognized worldviews. Now, next to this Catholic network, we have a few other confessional schools. Yesterday, we talked about the lack of Islamic school in Flanders. We have 4 recognized Islamic schools in Brussels. And we have as well a few Protestant and Jewish schools. And as I said yesterday, they are different from the Catholic schools because practically the public attending them is very different. Some surveys have found that the reason why parents choose a Catholic school nowadays has very little to do with religion. It has to do with the reputation of the school, it has to do with the programs, it has to do with the proximity to their house, and plenty of other things. While if you choose a Protestant, a Jewish, or an Islamic school, you definitely do it for religious reasons or reasons related to your culture. And you do it as well, in some cases, because you don't feel welcome in the public network. I'll take the case of the Jewish community in Brussels. It's a community that's highly secular. They don't go to the Jewish school because they want kosher food or because they want a deeper education in Judaism. Mostly, they go there because they're afraid that their children will be pestered in the public system. They don't want their kids to have swastika on their lockers or to hear the hissing sound of gas when they walk in the school in the morning. And I'm talking about examples that were reported to me. So what we have here is initiatives that actually are setting apart a set of society, some children, because we fail to provide them with a safe environment for growing up and learning together. Yes, of course, you know that education is a competence of the communities in Belgium. You may wonder why I choose to speak most of the time about the Flemish community or the French community, while a lot of people will simply talk about Flanders and Wallonia. The truth is that we do have 3 communities, the third one being the German-speaking community, but there's not much debate about religious education there, maybe because most of the people are still Catholic. It's a very peculiar place. But as well, more importantly, in Brussels, you have 2 systems. So we have, in the region of Brussels, both communities, the Flemish and the French, are responsible for education. So you will find both types of schools. The Belgian constitution provides a freedom of education, meaning historically not only the freedom of what used to be called and still is sometimes the father to choose the school of his children, but the freedom as well for anyone to open a school, which is why we have this diverse landscape of schools. It says as well that the community, that is the public authorities, must organize a neutral education. And it says as well that in the schools run by the public authorities, you have the choice between the teaching of one of the recognized religions or non-denominational ethics. This is the official translation of the Constitution I found on the website of Parliament. I'm not sure it's really the best one you can have, but it's the official one, semi-official. So this is really the framework of the debates that we are having today. What does it mean as far as religious education? Religious education is organized in every recognized religion or worldview, but a majority of the schools are Catholic confessional. Illustration by 2 statistics. On the left, you're looking at the French community taking together all the schools from all networks, primary education, kids aged 6 to 12, and you see that 60% of them receive Catholic religious education, 15% secular ethics, and 13% Islamic religious education. Now, the second drawing, I've chosen another example, but actually there are no striking differences between the levels or between the community. So the second drawing is about the Flemish community. in only the public networks. So in the schools where you can choose, when your parents can choose which class you want to follow, and there we see that they choose Catholicism with 38%, Islam 24%, secular ethics 34%. It means we have a system where three type of religious education, Catholic, Islamic, secular, are favored by a vast majority of the people attending, and we have a few minority classes which are chosen by much less pupils. Now coming to focus on Islamic religious education in Belgium. First, about the figures. So by the previous slide, we already know that it's an important subject that is favored and chosen by many families. And I want here to outline that it is even more so in major cities. I've computed the data for Brussels, host communities, and you can see that Islamic religious education is the #1 choice for public or state schools in Brussels. And apparently it's similar in Antwerp. So in urban cities, it's the most important class. Of course, those are averages, and it does not hide the fact that in some neighborhoods you will not have any student following Islamic religion class, and in other neighborhoods it will be close to 100%. So we'll have a de facto Muslim school as far as the public is concerned. What are the main issues about Islamic religious education in Belgium? But I think that Lenny has already covered some very interesting points in her presentation. There is the key role of the executive in that matter because of the principle of separation of church and state. This body is responsible for selecting the teachers and the inspectors and supervising the programs. And this executive has known many crises over the years and currently is still in another crisis. Belgium, the responsible people did not really think about organizing Islamic religious education for a very long time. So they actually tried to trigger the elaboration of programs and curricula very late, not until the beginning of the 21st century. In the French community, 2013, for the first référentiel de compétences that you see here pictured, and it's actually a very slim document, largely insufficient to cover 12 years of education. So we have a problem with the programs, we have a problem with the textbooks, because we don't have a domestic production of textbooks adapted to the Belgian reality. We have a problem with the education background of teacher, often not a proper degree or diploma, but we can only blame ourselves for that, because we did not set an institution for the education of Islamic religious teachers. And the same is true for the other minority religion. Because Belgium was dominated by the secular, who didn't want to have anything to do with religion, and the Catholic, who were only interested in Catholic religion, you can be trained properly at university in non-professional ethics, and you can be trained properly at university to become a Catholic teacher. But nobody thought about the minority religions. Well, they can fetch for themselves. And of course, it's becoming a problem specifically for Islam, not because Islam is different from Judaism or Christian Orthodoxy, whatever, but just because it is now the class most often chosen in cities like Brussels. So it's starting to really matter for society as a whole. Teachers training, inspection, there are not enough inspectors, just not enough manpower, and it's of course not done by the state authorities because of this principle of separation of church and state. The director of a school can just look if the teacher is there and just check that the teaching is being done in French in the French community. Cannot go into the content of the class. School directions sometimes, often are not interested in the subject, because in public schools you often have directors who are committed secular humanists. So they think that religious classes is just a nuisance, and it's annoying them, and they don't want to deal with it, and therefore well, they don't engage the teachers in order to make some improvements. Last but not least, the future of Islamic religious education is not secured because in the French community there has been a debate for many years about whether or not we should keep religious education. So because the future is not really certain, the politic doesn't want to invest in the matter, and people as well, students don't want to go and study to become a religious, an Islamic religious teacher because the class may disappear soon. Not everything is somber. We did have some kind of renewed programs, which is better from the previous situation. We have introduced a long time ago language tests for teachers. We have as well agreements. We had agreements with the executive to provide continuous training for the teachers, and we're starting to see programs at universities and schools of higher learning, but as Lenny mentioned, they are not very successful, but this is largely, I think, because the context is not very promising as well. There is a new generation of Islamic religious education teachers, highly motivated and very well trained. I think there are some old people really who shouldn't be in the classroom anymore, and then you have some young, enthusiastic people coming who actually are teaching in the neighborhoods where they grew up. They know the place, they know the kids, they know Belgium, and some of them are really fantastic. But they are still at the point, I think, a minority. There is finally a lot of interest in the matter. For a long time, there was none. But lots remain to be done. The future of the Muslim representative organ is very much uncertain, and the future is uncertain as well. The French community debate about whether or not to keep religious education in public schools. And here are the main arguments being put forward by people who are in favor of keeping the religious education, and people who think that they should be scraped all together. What are the arguments in favor of keeping religious education in public schools? First argument, of course, it's important to acknowledge a student's identity. I talked about making people feel welcome in public schools. If you organize religious classes in their own faith, you recognize that they are part of society like anybody else and that they deserve to be taken into account. That can mean as well, it should have meant actually, but hasn't to this point, that we could change some things about the food provided for the meals or for the holiday calendar. It's not normal that we still have automatically holiday, a day off for Christian holidays, and that you need actually to specifically ask for being away from school on a Muslim holiday. This should have been taken care of a long time ago. So second argument, if we organize Islamic religious education in state schools, we can have some control about it. We can promote an appeased, democratic, European version of the faith, and it's better than leaving religious education entirely into private hands where we don't know what's being said. Other argument, it's very important to respect equality between the different religions. And if we suppress religious education in public schools, what will we have? We will have still a majority of schools offering religious education for Catholics, because most schools are still Catholics. So if the public school doesn't do it, I will finish soon, there is no Islamic religious education on offer. Very quickly, why should we end it? First, to end the segregation of students, and the segregation goes beyond the religious class because, of course, they separate pupils to study religion, but because it's so difficult to organize. In some schools, they even separate them for the whole courses. So they will have in the first year of high school, one class with Catholics, one class with secular, one class with Muslim, and one class with all the rest. This is happening in Brussels. It's illegal, but people do it. If you suppress the class, you can open other students to other faiths and culture, because that's one of the important tasks of education, to make you acknowledge that people have a different opinion, different faith, and it's highly respectable. You can present a factual, scientific-based approach of religion. It would save money, and simplifies organization. Currently 7 choices. If tomorrow Buddhism and Hinduism are recognized 9 choices, it's very hard to manage for school directors. And respect privacy. In Belgium, it's forbidden to ask you what's your religious belief. But if you have a child and if you take him to public school at age 6, they will ask you to choose a religious class. Maybe that's not very compatible, and I will finish here by telling you that the future is indeed uncertain. In the French community already it's 1 hour instead of 2. There's been a resolution and Parliament voted recommending the government to scrap it all together, but I don't think the government will follow. The number of Islamic schools may rise as a response if that happens. And of course, I'm thinking as well that in 2024, when we have the 7th state reform starting, we could very well see demand for transferring all matters related to religions to the regions of communities. So that would mean we no longer needed a national representative organ, and Flanders, Brussels, Wallonia, they could do whatever they want with this matter. I am really thinking that this prospect is not unthinkable. Thank you. I apologize for taking too much time.